Hello, dear participants. Uh, you're welcome on board this module, the module on irrigation and water management, which we'll be having today. So please, as you are coming on board, as you are joining us today, try to signify your name and your location so we can know where you're joining us from today. Uh, I am Stephen Pokwola, the founder at Agro Optimizer, and I welcome you on board uh, the Crop Massey 1.0, which is maximizing your crop production strategies and principles for profitability and sustainability. Today, we shall be looking at module 4, which is talking on irrigation and water management. And very soon in the studio, our guest will be joining us to discuss irrigation and water management. So, those of you joining us today, please comment your name and where you're joining us from. I'm privileged to actually be with you today again. I never knew I could actually make it because we're already thinking on how we're going to proceed because I'm actually also out of town for a program. So, those of you joining us, please signify your name and location, and we'll be looking into irrigation and water management shortly. So we're currently waiting for our facilitator to join us in the studio. Okay. All right. Okay, just hold on. And your location, where you actually joining us from. Let us know you and where you joining us from. I'm Stephen Pokwola, the team leader of Agroptimizer. It's nice to see you today here again. And we'll be learning about water management. Um, when it's when we're talking about crop production, water management, and what it has to do with maximizing our crop production. So let's wait for our expert to join us in the studio. And if you've actually got any question on, if you've got any question on food, you've got any question on water management, uh, maybe you've got questions bothering you, you can actually drop it. You can actually drop it too. Must tell us your name and where you're joining us from. Good. Uh, Ayoade Abdusalam. You are the first person to actually comment with your location, with your name and location, where you're joining us from. Ayoade Abdusalam Additional on Jos. Good. That's very good of you. That's nice. I think you are the second person that has actually won yourself a gift of being punctual and prompt. Good. I could still remember in our previous class, uh, George from Kenya. Yeah. So your name has been noted too as the first person. Good. That's very nice. We have people joining us already. Ayuade Abdusalam Adeshino, you welcome. Uh, Taiwo, okay, yeah, okay. This is Israel Oluwadari from Niger State. Niger State. Wow, you're welcome on board too. Israel Oluwadara or Oluwadara. Please pardon me. But I just know it's going to be one of the two, either Oluwadara or Oluwadara from Niger State. That's good. How is Mina today? Good. Okay. All right. While we are with guest speaker to actually join us, let me just quickly brush up us on our previous topic that has to do with crop selection and planning. That's very good. I think I actually good. Okay, Taiwo is responding back to me. Mina is fine. That's good to know. That's good to know. Uh, I actually was actually telling you of a story of a company I was engaged with last year, 2023. They didn't actually do their crop selection well based on the factors they brought around. Uh, they they wanted to go into farming, so they consulted people to help them get farmland, and they got them farmland. They already had what they wanted to plant, but I don't know, maybe they didn't inform those that were helping them to search for land. And even if you have people helping you to search for land, when people want to do business, most people don't even really care about the welfare, or let's say the goals of those that actually going into business with them. So they got them the land, and they themselves didn't even take time to study the land and the environment. They went ahead to plant the crops they've got in mind, which was maize, and in some parts they planted soybean. Uh, Not know, unfortunately for them, the land which they planted soybean at some period of the year used to be waterlogged. It's not a When you get there, the soil is actually okay, but once it gets to a period of the year which is mid-year, that is the heavy rain period of the year, the place is always waterlogged. So there was no they didn't the crop they actually planted there was not fit for the land. If they have actually done their crop selection and planning well, they would have noted the error, and would have planned well. Uh they can still plant their soybean that part, and and then still have it well. But because there was nothing like planning, crop selection, they were just like all land are actually good, and they just dive into it, and that cost them a whole lot. That cost them a whole lot. And I could remember also, that was 2021. I found myself in a northern state. That is one of the northern states which I worked. That was Taraba, to be precise. Takum local government. They've got land there, but they cannot use it. Most of the time, they go into another community to get land to farm because they believe their lands are dead. Or better still, some set of them believe that the gods are angry with them. So whatsoever they plant on their land. Now taking you back away from crop selection and planning now into soil and soil health management. So they believe their lands are actually being caused, and so nothing good will actually come out of the land. But I got some piece of land from them over there, and I actually cultivated it. And just as you know, before I will do anything, someone of my of my experience and level of my experience and exposure in agriculture, and most especially crop production, I wouldn't go into anything without carrying out a kind of soil test. It was not even a well detailed soil test, but at first, because I know where I was actually gonna use, actually a biofertile, so I had to just check the pH. Then from the pH, I got to know that there is a problem, and I was able to correct the pH. So it took about 3 to 4 months to actually get that done. And by the time I plant, when the plant will be needing most of the nutrients that are available in the soil, something was already shifting. So by the time we were, to cut the long story short, by the time we were packing out our harvest from the bush out, passing through the village, one of the village, uh, some of the people there were like, where are you bringing all this from? Then I told them from the bush. So the story went all around in the community there, in the farmstead there, that this Yoruba man has come to farm with Yoruba Juju. Then I had to call one of my friends, which is also a youth leader in the community, to tell them this has nothing to do with juju or voodoo or whatsoever. This is practically operating based on knowledge. So we had to like form we had to like organize a class. We had to organize a training for farmers, and I told them what I and I told them if we have any one of them interested, I can actually put them through. So few of them actually volunteered to actually come on board the program, and we set up pilot program, and we did the whole thing, and they also got their produce, and that was when some of them started having trust back in their land, getting to know that their land can also give them what they are going outside there to get. All they just need to do is get to know the state of their land, get to know what is wrong, and amend it, and carry out what they ought to do, normal practices, good practices, and then they are going to have it. And that is why I always say what differentiates a successful man from an unsuccessful man, one of those things are uh, the knowledge. One of those things is knowledge, what you know, because you cannot do better than you know. All right, that's just on that. Thank God we already have our guest in the studio with me, so we just go straight into today's topic, into today's mission. So I'm gonna be inviting our guest speaker on board. All right. Good afternoon, ma.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello. Yeah, good afternoon, ma. You're welcome. You're welcome, ma.
You?
Uh, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm coping. I'm okay. Thank you. How about you?
All right. I'm fine too. It's nice to actually have you come on board. Thank you so much. So, guys, now that we have our facilitator on ground. So I'll put a pause to what I was telling you before so that we can actually go about the business of the day. Uh, so on the screen with me is Mrs. Shukra Umar. Hope I'm correct with the pronunciation. Mrs. Shukra
Way off
Umar
now.
is an irrigation and she's an irrigation expert. So when it comes to irrigation, water management, yeah, that's her feed. She's actually the founder of Syria Alpha Resources. I usually call her Green Waters, Madam Green Waters, because when you even look into the logo of uh, Syria Alpha, you see that symbol leaf, and then kind of I okay. I didn't actually prepare. I would have loved to actually have the logo and project it for you guys so you can see the leaf and you see the droplet of water, the green nature. So you are onto the right person today for the discussion on irrigation and water management. And those of you that may be having question on maybe what do you need, because I do have that question a lot. What do I need to actually set up maybe 1 acre drip irrigation? What are the kits I need to actually set up this kind of irrigation? We've got various irrigation system, we've got the drip and all those things she's gonna discuss with you. So don't let me just start jumping on the page before her. So you're welcome, ma. Yes, ma.
Thank
Can
you.
we meet you? I've actually introduced you, but maybe there are other things you may want the participants to know about you, and you have the floor. So the floor is actually yours now, ma.
Okay,
You're
sir.
welcome.
Okay. Good day, everyone. My name is Shukra Umar. I'm the founder of Sierra Alpha
You
Resource.
can have the grandma.
Think. Hello, can you hear me? I think the network is okay at my
Hello.
side. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Looks like it's your network. I think the network went off from your side. Hello?
Yeah, sorry for that.
Okay, no problem. But you can hear me
Yeah, we're back now.
clearly back? Okay. So, let me introduce myself. My name is Shukra Umar, and I'm the founder of Sierra Alpha Resource. I also couple as a irrigation expert, irrigation technician. We do design irrigation systems of all sizes and different types, and we sell irrigation materials too. So I'm going to go straight to the module 4, which I'll be covering. So I'll do an in I'll do an intro of what we aim to achieve during this course. So this module focuses on the role of irrigation and water management in crop production. So whatever we'll be talking about regarding water management would be in conjunction with crop production. So at the end of this, participants will be able to tell different irrigation methods, the importance of efficient water use, and the best practices for water resources to enhance crop yields while maintaining or while as trying to achieve sustainability. So our learning objective is to understand the importance of irrigation in. Thank you very much, Mr. Taiwo. Importance of irrigation in crop production. Secondly, we will identify different irrigation methods and their application. Thirdly, would learn how to implement effective water management practices to optimize water use. I would like to chip in there that it is actually very important for all of us to learn to implement effective water use because I believe that in any part of the world that you are, whether it's Nigeria, whether it's North Africa, I believe that you know that we are experiencing climate change, which means water, fresh water that is available is limited and we have to use it judiciously. So I'm going to start with the importance of irrigation in crop production. I think before we do that, I think we can just roughly tell ourselves what irrigation is about. Irrigation is one of the oldest man-made ways. The earliest civilization, it was their way of providing water apart from the natural way of waiting on rainfall. So irrigation is simply the supply of water to plants through man-made methods. That is the simplest term, or one of the simplest terms. So in order for us to understand what irrigation is about, we have to look at the various means and methods to which it can actually be achieved. And then we'll move ahead to the various techniques as well. So let's start with understanding soil water. This is just like an intro. Soil water is basically the level of moisture, and the amount of water that is available in the soil to plants. Now, humans can't survive without water. It applies to plants as well. So this is why you cannot just overlook the importance of moisture in your plant's health. So when we talk about soil water, we are also talking about the component of the soil, but we'll move to that. That will be gradually. That will be gradual. So let's start with irrigation. Minute, please. Okay. So let's start with the role of irrigation in enhancing crop yield and quality. What is crop yield? Crop yield is basically what you aim to achieve when you cultivate your plants. And in many and most cases, you want your crop yield to be high. Crop yield simply means the output you get from cultivation. So if you cultivate 1 hectare of land, the amount of output in kg or in gram or in tons that you get out of that area of land is the crop yield. Please, are you guys following? Because I noticed a blip just now. Kindly indicate, please. A comment, please. Okay. All right. I'm just going to go ahead. So let me go ahead to explain how water, that's moisture, how moisture affects crop yield. Like I said, crop yield is the output that you achieve from what you cultivated. And there are many factors that affect crop yield, which is not limited to the level of moisture available only. So one of the things that is quite significant is moisture. And I'm going to take it from how moisture affects crop yield right from the beginning of the plant life. So when you want to seed, when you want to cultivate your plants, one of the things you want to happen is, even if you're waiting on, if you are using the rain-fed method to water your plant. You want to plant, you most likely plant when you expect rain in a day or two, or hopefully very soon. So that means that in order for the seed that you put in the ground to actually break out of its dormancy, that's dormancy is like the state in which the seed is when it has not germinated. So in order for the seed to even break out of its dormancy, you need moisture, some level of moisture for that to happen. So that is from the very beginning of your plant's life. So when your seed actually germinates and then it starts bringing out leaf, you still need water to help it move nutrients in the system. From the roots, plants absorb moisture, nutrients, even air from the roots. So you need moisture to actually transport these nutrients that would be necessary, that are also part of what is necessary for your plants to grow properly. You need the water to move it about to achieve growth. So for your plants to move from just germination to transplanting stage, for transplanting stage is where if you are raising it in nursery, you want to put it in an intensive care before transplanting it to the field. So moisture is necessary for it to grow from seedling to the stage whereby it needs to flower, it needs to produce fruits. So that tells you how much, right from the beginning, moisture affects crop yield. So we will now shift this to how irrigation affects crop yield. It is general knowledge that rain is not predictable, and it's becoming even harder now to predict how rain will fall. I think last month we had series of heavy rainfall, but now nothing is showing up again. So you cannot base, you have a plant that its life cycle is 3 months and you only have 1 month of rainfall. What happens in the other 2 months? What happens to your crop yield when your plants don't get water? They won't get to transport their nutrients properly in the next 2 months. So these are the things that you need to really look at. It's not enough to get quality seeds. It's not enough to get fertilizers. Moisture is necessary for these things to actually work. For the potential yield of the variety that you cultivated to actually achieve that yield, it needs moisture, it needs the adequate nutrients, it needs the right nutrients and at the right time. So that should tell you how much irrigation is important, because you cannot depend solely on rainfall that is unpredictable. Now, one of the things that has been researched upon is the quality of crops, like the crop yield, the yield you get from cultivating your land, is the quality. Inconsistent watering, inconsistent moisture level affects the quality of fruits that you actually get from your plants. Overwatering affects plants, underwatering stresses plants. So either way, your plants can be going through a lot, a lot of stress. A lot of stress also leads, a lot of stress that can lead to the flowers dropping. I'm sure there are some farmers that have actually experienced that. Heat stress causes that when your plants are not getting enough moisture, Sometimes they drop their flowers at the stage where it's supposed to be flowering and then proceeding to fruiting. You'll be losing because of moisture. So the quality of fruits that you get to, let's say in the case of tomato, if you cultivate tomato and then you are still experiencing heavy rainfall towards the harvest period, there's a high likelihood that the fruits that you get from the tomato would be watery and soft. So the shelf life will be short in such a way that during transportation, half of your produce can get spoiled. And especially in developing countries with poor road networks, your produce can get bad along the way before they even get to the market where you will sell them. So it is very important to take note of all these things and how much moisture affects all your hard work as a farmer. So now we'll move to understanding water requirement for different crops and growth stages. Okay. So for different crops and their growth stages, different crops
Yeah.
require different amounts of water to survive, to thrive. And at different stages, they require some level of moisture compared to other crops. For instance, vegetable crops are crops such as pepper, tomato, we have cabbage, okra, and others, and also leafy vegetables such as we have sweetest pumpkin, that's ugu, and we have shoko, amaranthus, that's tete, ewedu, that's jute. Different crops require different level of moisture. They require different level of water for them to do very well. So if we look at the requirement for, let's say for example, let's take vegetable crops generally. Vegetable crops generally require a good amount, like an adequate amount of moisture all through their life cycle, like all through the stages of their life, from the seedling stage to the fruiting stage to the flowering stage, and from the flowering stage to the fruiting stage, they and to the harvesting stage, they require different level of moisture. I'll say, for instance, let's take for instance cabbage. Cabbage requires a lot of water. I think if you are familiar with cabbage, then you know that about 90% of the cabbage head is actually water. It's actually water, which means that during its production, it also requires quite enough water, enough water. And this applies to even grains. However, in the case of grains, they do not, grains such as wheat, corn, maize, they do not require the same level of moisture as vegetable crops. We'll take a look at, would have actually provided a slide, but we can't do that. So I'm just going to do the explaining and probably share this with Mr. Steven later. Different crops and the different stages of growth and their different water requirements at each stage. For so I'll take vegetable crops as a whole. For vegetable crops at the early stage, they need quite enough level of water, And then when they get to the fruiting, flowering and fruiting stage, they also need more water at that stage. Once it starts fruiting to, and then it's going towards the time you need to harvest, they need less water. One of the reasons why this happens is that, for example, in the case of tomato, is that you don't want too much water when your tomato have started that they've started fruiting already, and then they are hard. By the time they start ripening, you don't want them to become too soft, and that is one of the major reasons why our tomato paste sector of the tomato processing sector always complain of inaccessible or unavailability of raw materials, which is basically tomato to process tomatoes into tomato paste. Because most of the tomatoes that are available in the market are usually too watery. I know a lot of you have seen it because it's very common to see it in the market. They are usually too watery, they are not hard and firm. So at the end of the day, when they say they got a basket of tomato, what they will be able to process out of one basket of tomato will be highly insignificant to what they're trying to achieve in paste. So, which is why it is very important that when you buy certain varieties, they tell you that the shelf life, it has long shelf life, it can stay hard for a long period. You should actually also, in your own process of cultivating it, ensure you follow the procedures that they've already stated to achieve that firmness. That firmness. Sorry about that. I had a break. To achieve that firmness. So if at towards the fruiting stage to harvesting stage, close to harvesting stage, you're still watering them like when they are in the growth stage where they are still producing leaf before they start flowering, then you would produce fruits. You produce fruits that are not firm, that are not good for processing. So if the market that you're targeting is to supply companies that are producing tomato paste, tomato powder, you have to produce to meet what they would what they would need. So this is why it is important to understand the water requirements for different crops depending on the crop that you are cultivating and their growth stages. Now, the impact of water stress on plant health and productivity. That is under the importance of irrigation. So, in order for us to understand water stress on plant health and productivity, we have to go back to what plants and water does for plants. If water is responsible for germination, it means that when there is water stress, there's a high risk of your seeds not germinating when there is not enough moisture for them to break their dormancy. Sometimes people that are new to farming, they get seeds and they think that it is about putting them in the soil and expecting them to grow. Now, the seed has its own it has its own specification, but now you still require water. You can water a you can water your nursery today and then the next day you leave it and you're of the opinion that the watering from the day before should serve the next day without checking whether it is dry or not. Once your nursery is actually, or the soil in which you actually planted your seed is going from almost dry to dry, before you actually water your nursery or your soil again, you run the risk of having less seed germinating, because constant moisture is actually part of why you need your plant needs to germinate. Constant moisture, it has to be constant, it has to be consistent. You cannot let it dry out today and then tomorrow you water them. This is from the very from the very beginning of your plant health. So if we move on to that, through the growth stage, your plants can actually have stunted growth when they are stressed, when there's not enough moisture, when the moisture level is not consistent, when sometimes you overwater them and then sometimes you underwater them, it will show in the growth of the plant. So if um, if you have a water source, the best way to ensure that you have a consistent watering pattern is to already set up a system that actually allows you to easily water plants, giving them the time, and it's best to water deeply too. If you know that, okay, the capacity of the water source you have is to water your plant all round within 20 minutes, depending on the plant population though, then it is best to set it up to cater for that amount of plants and let it be consistent so that they know that, okay, this is the level of moisture they receive and it is consistent. In worst case of water stress, in which there is not enough moisture for plants to grow, they wilt. And wilting means they die. Your plants die from lack of water. Like I said earlier in the beginning, just like human beings, plants need water to survive. There are some plants that they can survive longer without water. But what they would most likely do is survive and not thrive. And you don't actually want your plant to be surviving only. When something is surviving, it's just there, it's not dying. It does not mean it will produce properly. So there is a difference between what you want to achieve and what you can achieve. And it depends on what you do. So when you stress your plants and then you're not giving them consistent water, you water them when you can. It will tell on the level of productivity that they would achieve. It will tell on your crop yield. It will tell on the quality of your fruit yield. It is as simple as that. Then overwatering too. Overwatering too can affect plants in the sense that they, if for some time you've not had any source of watering at all, and then all of a sudden you they got a lot of watering, it can also make the plants to retract because the system is actually not used to it. So that can also affect the plant. As much as you want to water your plants very well, you have to know the adequate amount that is necessary for them, and which won't be in excess. So we are going to move on to the types of irrigation methods. We have various types of irrigation methods ranging from surface irrigation, uh, drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, micro irrigation. Drip irrigation is also under micro irrigation. So let's look at surface irrigation. Surface irrigation is actually one of the oldest form of irrigation that we have, and it is quite simple and easy to set up. Excuse me. Okay, so we're here. So surface irrigation. Surface irrigation, by the name, as the name suggests, is the kind of irrigation whereby you have a water source. For any irrigation method to actually work, you need a water source. And water source can be natural body or artificial, which is man-made. We have natural water bodies such as river, we have streams, we have sometimes we have lagoon. Then for man-made water source, we have well, which is quite common in our part of the world. And we have borehole, we have canals, and we have also harvesting pits, rainwater harvested pits as man-made source of water. So for any irrigation system to work, you need a water source. And the water source is very important because to determine a lot of things. For natural water source, if you're looking at irrigating your farmland, then you are looking at a river that is next to it, like or not too far from the farmland, then you should look at the flow of the river during dry season, especially if you're looking to cultivate during dry season. Because we have some rivers in some places, but they are actually floodplains. Floodplains are just where flood pass, and then during when it's raining, you think that it's a river. It's always running and all that, but it doesn't actually run during. You won't see any water during dry season. So you have to be sure of your water source if it is actually going to be a reliable source of water during dry season if you're considering cultivating. So surface irrigation, one of the um, most common, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, is flooding. Flooding. Flooding is basically channeling the water in such a way that it passes through the area of land that is cultivated. So you basically just allow the water to go all around to flow and enter the farmland. That is what flooding is about. It's just like as the name intends, flood. So when you flood a place, it's not like you're directing it or you are precisely directing it. You are only making it enter a particular place, so which is in this case the farmland. So when you flood everywhere. You flood the row space and the row itself. You will allow water to flow into the land, and then the plants get water. So that is basically flooding. So then we have furrow flooding actually. Furrow flooding in this sense is usually when you have you make furrows, and then the water passes through the furrow is actually the row spacing that you have. So the water actually passes through the furrow, the spacing in between the rows. So if you have ridges made, the space in between each ridge is the furrow where the flooding actually happens. So that way the ridge absorbs water, which is then used by your plant, So you do it in such a way that it's allow the water is channeled to enter each furrow, each row, and then it flows down the length of the plant rows. So that is what furrow flooding is. And then we have the basin surface irrigation. This is another type of surface irrigation that is also quite common in the northern part of Nigeria. I have a picture of something like that, which was adopted by rice farmers in Kano. What they do is that they actually mold it they make basins in rectangular forms. There is usually an opening where the water flows in. It is, like I said, it's surface irrigation is basically more of flooding. So there's an entrance where the water flows in, and then the edges that have been molded, the basin that has been formed, they serve as the boundary in which the water does not flow out of. So this allows the water to flow in through an entrance, a small entrance. So it enters the box, which is the basin where the plants are. And the plants that are usually cultivated in this way in the north are usually grains such as rice, um, wheat, and in some cases, some people do that with even onions. So basin flooding is quite common for rice grains, basically. Now we'll look at the advantages and disadvantages of surface irrigation. One of the foremost advantage of surface irrigation, such as flooding, basin irrigation, furrow flooding, is that they are very cheap compared to other irrigation methods. They are cheap to set up, they are cheap to maintain, especially where labor is quite cheap to get. So when you have farm workers that the cost is not too high, you have them to channel the water, to maintain the edges of the basin, to redo the furrows, the ridges constantly for the water to flow properly. And then to help the terrain to so that the water will flow properly to the end of the row. So one of the advantages is cost. It is low cost. In some cases whereby the water source is very close to the farmer, they might not even need to even pump at all to the farmland. They just channel through from the river or from the stream nearby. Well, in other cases, they have to pump and then use hose to just get the water to their own farmland. So, in comparison to other irrigation methods, surface irrigation is quite cheap. Another advantage of surface irrigation is that it allows your plants to actually get enough water, like a lot of water. So if you cultivate a plant that actually requires a lot of water, surface irrigation such as the basin type can actually be a good source of irrigation, a good method of irrigating your farmland if your plant requires a lot of water. So that is another advantage of surface irrigation. And then we have the disadvantages of surface irrigation. Those are the downside of it. One of the downside of surface irrigation is that a lot of water is being wasted. A lot of water is being wasted. For example, in the case of channeling the water directly from a nearby river or stream, it means that the water has to pass through some land to get to the farmer's land. And while the water is passing through those farmlands before it gets to the farmers, it means that the soil along that route will be absorbing the water, which will reduce the quantity. And if there is nothing along that way that is actually cultivated for the purpose of harvesting to be useful to humans, it's just wastage. The water is just being wasted. Another disadvantage of surface irrigation is actually in terms of time. I think one thing that people do not calculate is that the amount of time that they will use in maintaining furrow flooding, basin irrigation. They have to keep ensuring for basin irrigation now, they have to keep ensuring that the edges are intact. It doesn't break out so that it stays in the basin and waters the plant. So this takes a lot of time of the farmer, the time you can use in doing other things. You have to spend it in ensuring that the edges are intact. Another disadvantage of surface irrigation is weeding. There is high level of weeding when you use surface irrigation because there is no precise target. You're not trying to just water the plants that you cultivated alone. You're watering the whole space. You're just channeling the water to enter the farmland. You're not channeling it towards the plant itself. You're just watering the whole space, which means that weeds would also be getting water. And when weeds get water, they also grow, they get water, they also transport nutrients that is available in the soil that should be for the cultivated plants only. So when the weeds also get nutrients, they get water, that means they will also grow very well. So as your plants are growing, the weeds are growing, and then they are competing with your own cultivated plants. So that is one big disadvantage of surface irrigation. It is why it is not advisable. It's wasteful and it causes more stress. So at the end of the day, the cost of production is increased because of more frequent weeding. You have to it's either you do the weeding yourself or you get laborers to do the weeding, the constant weeding due to the availability of water to plant and weed as well. And weed, one disadvantage of weeding of weeds in farmland is that they reduce the crop yield. They suck up nutrients that should be available to plants. So by doing that, they shorten the ration of the cultivated plants, which tells on the crop health and eventually tells on the crop yield. So from surface irrigation, another irrigation method that we would look at is the sprinkler irrigation. The sprinkler irrigation is uh, a more modern form of irrigation, which isn't as old as the surface irrigation. It makes use of sprinkler heads. These sprinkler heads they come in different sizes and they have different specifications and they cover different ranges of space. So the amount of land that an half-inch sprinkler will cover won't be the same as 1-inch sprinkler. The way sprinkler irrigation works is while it is installed, it rotates and sprinkles water within the range that it can cover. When you install an half-inch sprinkler with a specification of having a spray range of 11 meters, what this means is that it can only spray water within 11 meters around it. And most of the sprinklers are usually 360 degrees. They rotate 360 degrees. What this means is that they rotate in full cycle. So that means it rotates in a cycle and it sprays water in a cycle in within the range that it's meant to cover. So depending on the size of the sprinkler that you actually get, depending on the size, is the size of the sprinkler that will determine the range, the space of land, the area of land that it will cover. Now, when we talk, let me quickly chip in terms of area of land. When we talk about area of land, we have different land sizes. We have the plot, we have the acre, and then we have the hectare. Now, there's always this dispute, especially in our part of the world, whereby someone would say they have 2 acres of land, but at the end of the day, when they measure it, they actually have 1.5, and it's usually due to measurement issues. So I think when you get irrigation systems, when you get farmland, it is best to measure it and be sure of the actual size of land that you have. That would determine the arrangements you would make for them, the layout of the farm, and it will actually be very instrumental in how you would actually set up your irrigation systems. So back to sprinkler system. So sprinklers, there are different type of sprinklers. Like what they do is basically sprinkle water within their own range. We have the center pivot sprinkler. This is like a set of sprinklers that hang on to a big pole and they move. We have also under the sprinklers, we have these um, stationed sprinklers, and then we have, in some cases, the multiple sprinkler system. So in the multiple sprinkler system, you have multiple sprinkler heads watering an area of land. In the single sprinkler system, you have just one sprinkler head, usually movable, watering an area of land. In, for example, if you want to water an acre of land using 2 inches sprinkler head, which is, let's say, 2 inches ring gun, an acre of land would be 63 meters by 63 meters. That is the standard size. If you want to water it and then you have a 2-inch sprinkler and you do not want to double it, that would mean you would need to move it from one location to the other, because the range that 2-inch sprinkler can cover is 30 meters. The highest it can cover, which is its maximum capacity, is 30 meters. So if you want to cover 63 meters, that means you have to move it forward and move it backwards so that every area of land is covered. And this is possible with wheels. The hose wheel, whereby the hose follows the sprinkler, it sprays it forward and then even backwards. So that can work for some people. However, in some cases, some people would rather prefer the stationed ones, which allows them to use multiple sprinkler heads. So let's say in the case of having 1.5-inch sprinkler head, which the spray range is about 18 meters, you can position it in an acre of land at regular intervals, in which where the spray range of the sprinkler ends, another one continues. So that is how the sprinkler systems are installed. You actually calculate it in the range that it can cover, given that you provide the pressure, enough pressure that it needs to work properly. Sprinklers cannot work without enough pressure. In fact, some sprinklers will not rotate. In fact, a lot of sprinklers will not rotate if there is not enough pressure coming from the pump. So when you buy a sprinkler head of 1 inch and the pressure is low, it will not achieve the 18 meters you're expecting it to achieve. No, it won't. because the pressure is part of what would actually allow it to spray up to that length. So in order for it to achieve that, you need a matching level of pressure. In some cases, some people have, they say they have a borehole where they want to use for sprinkler system. You have to understand that the capacity of the borehole to bring out water does not mean it has enough pressure left to actually power a sprinkler to achieve the spray range that it's supposed to achieve. So in this case, you might need a surface pump. You might need a surface pump that would actually power the sprinkler directly and allow it to go as far as it could go. So that is for sprinkler system, the stationed ones and the multiple heads ones and the movable ones. So we'll go on to the, this is five already, we'll go on to the advantages of the sprinkler irrigation for various crop types. Now, for before we go on to the advantages of sprinkler systems, let's talk about the criteria for the sprinkler system. One of the major criteria when you want to consider sprinkler for your irrigation is the crop that you want to irrigate. The crop that you want to irrigate will determine if it is actually a suitable method of irrigating your farmland. Yes, there is also the factor of cost for a lot of farmers, but I think you should look at what you're trying to achieve, and that should be the main thing for you. So there are suitable crops and there are unsuitable crops. So the best thing is to go for crops that to go for an irrigation method that fits the crop that you're trying to cultivate. For sprinkler systems now, sprinkler irrigation is best suited for closely spaced crops. It is best suited for closely spaced crops. What this means is that crops that you can space them closely together, that they don't need much spacing between the rows, between even intra-row, inter-row and intra-row, they don't need much spacing. Let's say crops that you can only space them 10 centimeter apart. Those are the kind of crops that are suitable for sprinkler system. Let's say, for example, certain grains such as rice. Rice is usually closely spaced. So in that case, you can use sprinkler system is actually very good for it. Sprinkler system is very good for it. So you have to determine the kind of crops that you want to cultivate before you just choose an irrigation method. Just because an irrigation method works well for a particular crop does not mean it can work well for other crops. So when you want to select a sprinkler irrigation system, you have to consider if the crop that you're trying to cultivate actually likes the method in which sprinkler works. For instance, if we want to look at crops that do not like the method in which sprinklers work, we'll look at tomato plants. Tomato plants like water, and sprinkler waters everywhere within the range. But tomato doesn't like water on its leaf. It's one of the reasons why farmers do raised beds now, so as to allow proper drainage of excess water from the bed while it still retain the adequate one it needs. So in a sprinkler system where it waters everywhere within its range, it means that water would be on the leaf of the tomato plants, and before you know it, it will start harboring pests, and pests will grow properly. They will grow very well when the environment is wet and humid enough. They will start repopulating, they will start reproducing. And once there are a lot of pests to deal with, that is a serious problem for the crop health. The plant's health will deteriorate because they will start attacking the plants. And once they start attacking your plants, you have to even spend more on pesticide or fungicide. And at the end of the day, it would affect the crop yield. So you have to look at the crop that you want to irrigate before you actually choose an irrigation system. So another thing to look at apart from the crop when opting for a sprinkler system is the slope of the land, also known as the topography of the land. The slope of the land is important because runoffs are very, very possible, and then it leads to a lot of water wastage and leaching, nutrient leaching. If the land is slopy and it's not flat, in which when water drops on it, it would be absorbed by the soil, then sprinkler system would not be efficient in that kind of location. A slopy land means that water will be running off it rather than being absorbed. A larger percentage of the water would be running off rather than being absorbed by the soil. So at the end of the day, your plants won't even get enough water because it will just keep flowing away. So the slope of the land, whether it is leveled or it is uneven or it is even, it is important when determining whether you want to choose a sprinkler system or not. And then the soil type, thirdly, soil type. The first one is the crop, the second one is the slope of the land, and then the third one is soil. The soil type is very important when choosing a sprinkler system. When water touches the soil, the ability of the soil to absorb it is important in a sprinkler system, in any irrigation system actually. But in a sprinkler system, it is much more than that, in the sense that if you use sprinkler on a muddy soil, then you should already know that there will be a problem of absorption. there, there would be, because mud does not easily absorb water. The water stays afloat. So the meaning that even your plants are going to stay longer without water before it gets absorbed, before the soil absorbs it, before they absorb it. So in such a case, it's really not a good option for it. And in terms of sandy soil is also very porous. Very porous in the sense that it does not retain water. So you're using a sprinkler system that water's everywhere and then the water just goes away. It won't serve the purpose. But in the case of, let's say, sandy loam, you can expect that the soil, as the water is dropping on the soil, the soil will be able to absorb it, and that way it will be retained. Some of it will be retained, and then the plants will be able to have access to water even after you stop watering it. So soil is also very important when choosing sprinkler system. And the fourth one, which is also a very important criteria when choosing the sprinkler system, is water source and its capacity. Water source is where the source of water it is the source of water where you'll be getting water to actually use your sprinkler system. If you are going to use sprinkler for an acre of land, you should be able to tell the amount of water that your plants will be needing, the amount of water that you can say that you can be sure that you would get from your water source. So if your water source, by your estimation, can only cater for half acre, it is in your best interest to actually cultivate half acre. It is in your best interest to cultivate half acre because that is what your water source can cater for. If your water source can cater for 2 acres, an hectare or 1 hectare of land is 2.5, approximately 2.5 acres of land. You cannot set up a sprinkler system that can cater to 2 acres of land. If you do that, it means that there will be shortages. There will be shortages in the sense that there will be days where you will not have water to give your plants, or even if you water them every other day, that means there will be skipping. You would have to skip some days because water is not available to water all your plants. So it is always best to work with the capacity of your water source. If your water source is well and you want to use sprinkler system, you have to ensure that the size of the land is something the well can cater for, because the sprinkler would water everywhere within its range. So you have to ensure that the water source is capable in terms of liters of water it can produce, that is available at the intervals in which you want to be watering them consistently. So those are the criterias for the sprinkler system, the major ones: the water source and its capability, suitable soil type, slope of the land, the type of crop that you want to cultivate. So we'll move from that to the advantages of the sprinkler systems and the disadvantages. One of the advantages of the sprinkler system is that it waters the plants like adequately, consistently. Sprinklers sprinkle water around its range, meaning that the plants around its range will get the same level of water when it's working properly under normal setup. When it's properly set up, it waters them consistently, meaning that when you water your plants, you're sure that okay, they will get the same level of water. So let's say in the case of you cultivated a let's say jute, or let's say amaranthus, for some people that might not know other names. So if you cultivate that and you know they are closely spaced, meaning that, and they enjoy having water consistently. So that means they would thrive very well. The leaves, given that they have enough nutrients available to them, and then the sprinkles water on them, and it reaches their roots. They grow very well. The leaves will be green and fresh. It will serve the purpose very well. So in those kind of case, this crop is suitable. It's a very big advantage to them for those kind of crops. Another advantage of the sprinkler system is that it is less costly compared to its micro irrigation counterpart. It is less costly because you can cover a large expanse of land at once. There are sprinklers that goes as far as 60 meters. Their spray range is 60 meters. So that means they cover up to 60 meters of land at once. They sprinkle water within the range of 60 meters at once. So sprinklers can cover a large expanse of land within a short period of time. That is one of the advantages of sprinkler system. Cover large expanse of land within a short period of time. Those are the advantages of the major advantages of the sprinkler system. And then we have to move on to the disadvantages of the sprinkler system because of time. One of the disadvantages of the sprinkler system is because it actually uses a lot of water. The sprinkler system sprinkles water everywhere within its range, meaning that it will also sprinkle even row spaces where it's just meant for aeration. There's no plants there. It's sprinkled there. And when it sprinkles that place, it's actually wastage, and it's actually not serving any plants. So there's higher wastage of water under the sprinkler system as well. So another disadvantage of the sprinkler system is it also promotes the growth of weed. So it sprinkles water everywhere, which means that unwanted weeds would also grow because they have access to water as well. And then you need to weed more. You need to weed because you don't want your plants to be competing with weeds on farmland. So you have to weed. So there's more cases of higher weed in case of sprinklers because of how it works. So those are the advantages of the sprinklers irrigation system. So now we'll move to the drip irrigation system. Drip irrigation system, just like the name says, it drips water. It's also called the trickle irrigation system. It drips water slowly near the root zone of the plant. That is how drip irrigation system works. It trickles water, it drips water at the root zone of the plant. It works with lines of, it has different components, mainly the main line, the water source, the pump, the main line, the sub-main line in some cases, not every cases. Then you have the fittings, the connectors, you have the valves, the air valves, the ball valves, the controlling valves. You have the drip lines, which are the lateral lines, which can be the drip pipe or drip tips. And in some cases, you can have the irrigation controller. There are also irrigation controllers for the sprinkler system as well that automates the system and controls the system. So for drip irrigation system, the components are the main line, the sub main line, the drip lines, the connectors, the valves, the filter system, the fertilizer system. We have the Venturi injector. We have fertilizer tank, which is part of the irrigation drip irrigation system component, depending on the type of drip irrigation you're going for. Then we have the filters. The filter system, we have the sand filter, we have disc filters, and then we have the screen filters. I would like to go into that a little. When we talk about filtration, some people feel like once they have the system and they feel that the water is neat enough in their opinion, they don't need filters. The filter protects your system from clogging. Most drip lines are usually not wide, meaning that they can easily get clogged if not properly maintained. So, in order to, and then filters serve different purposes. In order to protect your system, you have to select the proper filter for your system. Screen filters out or take leaves out sand particles and other grainy substances that might want to pass through the water into your system. Screen filters stops that, it restricts that. This filter, on the other hand, it stops it restricts the flow of inorganic matter into your irrigation system. And sorry, organic matter into your irrigation system in the sense that we have microbes in water, we have microorganisms that live in water. So the disc filter actually protects your system against that. So those are the difference, and that is the difference between the disc filter and the screen filter. And we have the connectors and all of that, and then the drip lines. We have the drip tapes and the drip pipes. Then we have the drip hose, which is customizable, which is suitable for three crops. Three crops in the sense that you can space them up to 2 meters, 1.5 meters, because tree crops usually require enough space. Let's say coconut trees, citrus trees such as oranges. When you want to cultivate those, you need enough space in between the trees. Banana trees, for example, you need enough spacing. So in those cases, drip hoses and drip pipes are used, and then they are spaced according to what is needed, according to the required spacing in between them. So before we go into the benefits of drip irrigation system, I would like to talk about the criteria when you want to, the criteria you have to take note of when you want to adopt the drip irrigation system. Like I said earlier, the drip irrigation system is a method of watering plants using system of tubings and emitters to deliver water directly to the root zone of plants. So let's talk about the goals of drip irrigation system. The goal of this drip irrigation system is to reduce water waste, conserve resources, and minimize pollution. I would explain this by saying that drip irrigation system, as you know it, only waters the root zone of plants where water is needed the most, which does not allows it to give water where it is not needed, where it is not necessary. It conserves resources. When you only water where it is needed, it means that you will not be giving nutrients to it. You will not be giving water to it. Minimize pollution. We have cases of leaching in the sprinkler system whereby nutrients and chemicals that are sprayed, the flow, the runoff from where the area in which it is needed to even nearby lands. In the case of drip irrigation system, because of the slow dripping of the water, pollution is minimized significantly. So we go to the importance of drip irrigation system. Drip irrigation system significantly improve the quality of plants, and it increases their productivity in an efficient and sustainable way, which helps conserve resources for future generations. So one of the other things that you can note about drip irrigation is that it waters precisely. Water is directed towards the plant roots, nowhere else, minimizing evaporation and ensuring that the water reaches where it is needed most. Drip irrigation system allows the soil to absorb water gradually, which actually reduces leaching and runoff. Drip irrigation system also helps the soil to maintain consistent level of moisture, preventing soil erosion and promotes healthy soil structure. So for the criteria for drip irrigation system, when you want to install drip irrigation system, what are the things you have to look at? Then we have the firstly the water source and the quality of the water source. For the water source, we have different type of water source, and then the quality in the sense that if it has organic matter or if it doesn't have organic matter. Like I said earlier, it will determine a lot of things because you do not want your tubings, your main line, your drip tapes, your drip pipes to get blocked because some microorganisms started growing inside them because they were able to pass through. So you have to understand where the water is coming from, the capacity of the water source, if it can cover the amount and the space of land that you want to cover, and if the water is clean enough. If it's not clean enough, and what measures you need to put in place if you need is a sophisticated filtration system, like the kind of filters that you use when setting up your drip irrigation system. So number one criteria for drip irrigation system is the water source. Number two is the soil type and variation. The soil type And variation means that the kind of soil that you are setting up your drip irrigation system on. The soil type will determine the water retention level, how well it would actually keep water for your plants after you water them. So that's the water retention level. And how well it absorbs the water as well. That's also another criteria. And thirdly, we have the crop variety and the root type. Crop variety means that if the crop requires um, how the crop prefers to get water. Some crops they don't like water on their leaves. So those kind of crops, such as let's say cucumber, you can use drip irrigation system for cucumber. It doesn't really like water on its leaf. So and then the roots, is it tap root or fibrous root? Those kind of things actually are important when choosing the irrigation system. And lastly, you have to look at the materials that you'll be using for your drip irrigation system in terms of the emitters or drippers in certain cases, the discharge and also the spacing. In terms of the discharge is how much water per hour that your drip irrigation system releases. There are the details are usually on the label of the drip irrigation kit. Let's say 4 liter per hour. In some cases, some people want to use higher liter per hour, but you have to look at the soil type. If your soil does not absorb water and cannot hold water very well, and choosing an emitter that drips water at 8 liter per hour might be too high for it to absorb water to hold the water. So it might be best to choose a 4 liter per hour kind of emitter, kind of dripper. Now, emitters are usually they are inside drip pipes and drip tips. Drippers are the ones that you put outside. So, and spacing is also important when choosing the drip irrigation system. Your plants, the materials you get should be according to the spacing required for your plants. If your crop requires that you space it at 30 cm, 30 centimeter, you get a drip irrigation equipment that is 30 centimeter. If it requires 40 to 50%, 50 centimeters, you get a drip irrigation equipment that fits what your crop needs. So basically, they are kind of intertwined. You have to look at this criteria when choosing the drip irrigation system. You look at the water source, like I said earlier, the soil type, your crop, the type of crop you want to cultivate, and then the emitters, discharge, and spacing. So from there, we'll move to the advantages of the drip irrigation system. The drip irrigation system, because firstly, the drip irrigation system, because it slowly emits water towards the roots of the plant, it means that it won't water where it is not needed. So there will be less cases of weed. So it doesn't allow unwanted weed growth, which means you have to spend less on weeding. If you have to weed by yourself, that means you won't have to weed as much as it would have been in case of, let's say, surface irrigation or sprinkler irrigation. So there's less weeding in the case of drip irrigation system. Another advantage of it is that it can be timed. Drip irrigation can be timed in such a way that, okay, if it's 20 minutes that you need to run it for your plant to be properly watered, it can be easily set up to do that. And then they all get the water, they get enough water all around. Another advantage of the drip irrigation system is that it does not waste your fertilizers, your inputs. Basically, it doesn't waste it. It doesn't spray where it is not needed. You can fertilize your system easily. It is more easier to maintain and use. It is easier to maintain and use. So when you want to fertilize, you don't need to work about. You can just use your drip irrigation system, the Venturi injector, the fertilizer tank to just fertilize the whole system at once at the same time. So you mix the your fertilizer in the container, and then you can put in your fertilizer injector, and then it ensures it has a way of creating pressure to pass the nutrients all around at the same time. So you don't need to work about to actually put in your fertilizers near your plants. And they get it toward it's delivered at the root of the plant, which means the plant is the one getting the nutrients, not just random spaces, not just space in between the land. So it saves you cost on fertilizer, on pesticide. If you're using systemic pesticide, for example, it delivers it near the root, and then the plant absorbs it through its roots, and then it works for it. And you don't need to use extra. So that's one of the other advantage of the drip irrigation system. Then let's move to the disadvantage of drip irrigation system. One of the disadvantage of the drip irrigation system is that it is expensive. It is expensive to set up initially. The initial cost of setting up is high for a lot of farmers. But what I would like people to look at is that once you set up a space using, if you set up drip irrigation in an acre of land, on an acre of land, you don't need to spend, when properly maintained, you don't need to spend more on it for a couple of years. It's because the system works for years. So once you set up that space, you only expand to other spaces that you need to cover. And when you are new to irrigation, I think I would say that at the end of this. So it's one of the major disadvantage of it is that the initial cost of setup is high. It's quite high. So it is not very easy for farmers to adopt easily. Another disadvantage of it is if it is on uneven uneven land. If the land is not even, it can be a difficulty. It can be a very serious difficulty. So then we're going to look at the maintenance for drip irrigation system. One of proper maintenance of your drip irrigation system is crucial for its longevity and efficiency. So you need to do regular inspections to ensure that the system is okay. You check for leaks, regularly inspect the components, the drip lines, the lateral lines, the main line. If there's any place where there are leakages where you need to couple together, is check that. Monitor the water pressure. The drip irrigation works by gravity. You don't need high pressure for it to work. So monitor the water pressure that it is within the recommended range for it to operate so that it will not damage anything. And then you have to regularly also inspect the filters. Sometimes the filters get dirty because of the particles, organic matters that pass through them. So you have to clean them. Yes, you can clean your filters. So you have to clean them to avoid them clogging and then for them to work properly so that your water flow will not be blocked. So those are the things, and then you check your emitters too if they're working properly, if there's no blockage, no clogging. You have to check them once in a while. So that is that about drip irrigation system. Now we will move to the efficient water management practices. Strategies for reducing water use in agriculture. Now, it is important for us to manage the water that is available because we have limited fresh water in the world. Like there's limited access to fresh water in the world. And it is important to maximize the water when we have. we have to maximize them. So one of the strategies to maximize water use is that you plant crop and cover crops. There are certain crops that you can plant that they protect the soil from evaporation, they reduce evaporation, so other crops can get more access to it. Then the moisture level can be maintained better in such a way that the soil does not dry out easily. So that way, cover crops helps in reducing the rate of evaporation. Another way that we can actually conserve water is by mulching. You can mulch organically and inorganically. Organic mulching is using of dead old leaves, dry old leaves, straws, haze that the northerners use for huts. You can use that. You put it on the raised bed and cover the space where you want to cover, so that there's less case of evaporation, and then you can you can have some level of moisture for a longer period. So mulching also helps to conserve water. So that is for organic mulching. Organic mulching means that you use leaves, dry leaves, old leaves, sometimes even the stalks of maize that you've harvested, you can use it for that. And then the inorganic mulching is the use of plastic films. You can use the black one or the reflective one. It basically covers the land, and then it does not allow the moisture to be lost. And then it also actually suppresses weed growth. Weed also takes up water, so mulching serves double purpose of suppressing weed and also helping to conserve the moisture level. Then another way to conserve water is rainwater harvesting. When it's raining, it is really advisable that we should harvest water. If you have water tanks in which you can actually harvest rainwater in, it is good to do that. Or in some cases, you follow the flood patterns on your farmland and you dig it towards a pit, a man-made pit. You can cover it with geomembrane, tarpaulin, so that as to ensure that the water does not get absorbed in their pits by the soil. So when the water flows from the floodplain, it goes into the pit, and then it's like a canal in some cases. Then you save the water like that. So rainwater harvesting is one of the techniques of conserving water. Then scheduling irrigation. Scheduling irrigation is actually about timing your irrigation systems. You can time your sprinkler system. You can time your drip irrigation system. So when you time them, you actually you set the time in which they want to run. If it is 20 minutes, if you want to water your plant for like 1 hour, if it's a large expanse of land, and then it's going to ensure that all of them get water. So you time it in such a way that okay, you only give them enough water that they need without it stressing, without it being unnecessary, without it being an excess. So you time your water. It is 30 minutes that you know that your plants need water for the next day. Then you time it precisely to that time. Timers are available in different forms and sizes for different sizes of land for different irrigation systems. These timers help to accurately measure the length of time, the time you want it. If it's 6 p.m. that you want to time your irrigation system to run, it starts running at 6 and then it runs for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, as just as you prescribed as is needed by your plant. So scheduling irrigation using timers is one of the ways in which you can conserve water so that to avoid wastages. Then monitoring and maintenance. As much as there are systems, there are timers to help schedule your irrigation system, you still have to check up on them. You have to regularly inspect your irrigation system for any case of leakages so that to ensure that there is no wastage of water, because the water that is wasted can actually be useful if, in case of, let's say, you want to expand to cultivate the other land that is nearby. That kind of water can be channeled to to water those plants in those areas. So there's no need to waste water that is not even really available. So it is very important to conserve water. Very, very important. You can also use tools, simple tools such as soil testers, soil meters to check the moisture level. If you check your soil moisture level regularly and then you see that your soil actually retains water very well, so such that you might not even need to water for 2 days. Like you check the soil moisture level and it's ideal up to the second day, meaning that you have to water every third day. I think it is a very good initiative to actually use. I'm sure there are a lot of people that have soil meters. So you can use this meters to check how long your soil can actually retain water. So that way you can actually schedule your irrigation system to run effectively and efficiently without wasting resources. So that is that about conserving water. And I'd say I would like to go back to saying that rainwater harvesting is something that we could really try to employ in our various farmlands. In cases of land that was rented, that is not yours, that the ownership is not clear. The owner might not be okay with farmers digging a pit or a canal or anything of such permanent effect on the farmland. So in such a case, you can make use if you cannot make use of storage tanks because of cost. You can actually look at tarpaulin tanks, which are more cost effective. You can get people that build it for you, and then you can use such storage system to actually harvest rainwater, and you'll even be able to harvest more of the water, which can be used at a later date. Let's say even if you want to go into dry season cultivation, dry season farming, you can save water ahead of time when there is heavy rainfall, which will just go away and run off. So I hope this has been an insightful session for you. Hope so. I'd like to call the attention of the so I'll have to okay.
Wow, that was a wonderful presentation by you, man. We really enjoyed it. Even those of us at the back end, we really taking our notes. I believe, can you hear me? Uh, so it's time for questions actually, and we have about only two people have actually dropped their question. So maybe you just quickly attend to them. I think they're going to appear on the screen there. You're going to see them on the screen. So I may not need to read them out. Uh, okay, the first is not a question actually, but trying to make us know. That is from Ayodele Abdulsalam, trying to make us know that this is the second time Ayodele, that's a man, that this is the second time he will actually be in your class. And he got I knew about furrow irrigation from her for the first time. Wow, that's nice. That's nice to hear. Then I think, okay, yeah, the question we've got here is still from Ayodele Abdulsalam. Says, is it only in surface irrigation farmers are experiencing high level of weeds? or it applies to all types of irrigation?
Okay.
Did you get the
Should I
question, ma?
go? I've seen it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So
You
is
can.
it only in surface irrigation that farmers are experiencing high level of weed, or it applies to all types? Okay. The question is no. Surface irrigation, the way it works, actually floods everywhere. And you know the way most plants work, you have to space them for aeration purpose, for even farm easier farm activities. You have to space them. So when you space them between the rows and then yet you're putting water in everywhere, that's why you have high level of weed in surface irrigation. And it applies in sprinkler irrigation as well, because a lot of people actually use around the world actually use sprinkler irrigation for um not closely spaced. You know, I said earlier that sprinkler irrigation system is actually good for closely spaced crops, crops that they are or that they are together, like they are not spaced properly. They don't require spacing. So in those in sprinkler system, the width is also high. It's just that in a lot of different parts of the world where they use sprinkler systems very well, they also have simple machines or mini tillers that they can use to weed. But you know that isn't the case for our side of the world. So it can be a a serious cost of a higher cost of production, because you have to weed more. Even if you're using herbicides, you still have to weed more. So in sprinkler system and surface irrigation system, that is where you experience high level of weed compared to drip irrigation system. So it doesn't apply to all irrigation system. You have low level of weed in drip irrigation system. So that should answer your question, Mr. Idola. Okay. And I would actually like to add this before I round up that I don't know if you guys saw the news that China is set to get a record or record an all-time high of 700 million tons of grain yield this year. They've been maintaining 650 million tons of grain yield for 9 years consecutively. And the reason why I'm saying this is that I hope you guys understand when I say tons of grain yield. A ton is like 1,000 kg. Right now in Nigeria, the highest yield per hectare that a grain has been able we have gotten from maize is 10 to 12 tons per hectare. So I'm saying that China is producing up to 650 million tons of grain yield per year. For 9 years now, they've been producing in that range. And now this year, they are set to actually break that record with 700 million tons of grain yield, making them self-sufficient in that with their grains. And the interesting thing about this is that 75% of their farmlands that produce grains are irrigated. This should tell you a lot. 75%, over 75% of their farmlands are irrigated. So meaning that their grain their grain yield that they are getting is highly irrigated, not waiting on rainfall. Not waiting on rainfall. So I understand that yes, we still have a long way to go, but we have to understand that it's not just by getting the right seed and getting fertilizers. Water is very essential, moisture is very essential, and we have to just put it where it is a necessity. It is. All right, Mr. Steven.
All right. Thank you so much, ma. It's really been an impactful section with you again this evening. Yeah. I think it's evening. It's evening. Yeah. And I think it's evening in some other places, but it's already night in some other places. Because yeah, I know of people are currently at their night hour right now, and yeah, that's very nice. That's very nice. We learned so much. I particularly even learned so much today. So we really appreciate you, ma. Thank you so much. And then before we leave, I don't know if you actually mentioned it towards the closing of the response you gave to the answer, but I just want to, maybe you could re-emphasize, or maybe you have more thing to add to it, like a goodwill message, like maybe your advice to the farmers that really want to improve their productivity. Maybe you just have a lifeline to give them on irrigation and water management as regards maximizing crop productivity, ma.
Okay. Huh? What I would like to add is that farmers that are looking towards consistent high productivity should try and as much as possible to tick all the necessary boxes. They should try as much as possible to tick all the necessary boxes in terms of the right inputs, the right time, the right source. So in terms of that, and then
And the
the
right measure.
necessary, the right measures. There are some
uh,
techniques that they are old, they are still good, but there are some that are old that are already redundant. So you should be willing to let go of them. You have to look at what you
okay.
would get from it, the advantages, the benefits, the purpose that they serve when adopting things. So when you cultivate, think about getting the right input, think about the timing, think about providing the necessary things that your plants need. And particularly in terms of irrigation, when you're thinking about the cost, think about it in terms of what you're trying to achieve, and then the purpose that it will serve. And for farmers that are looking towards drip irrigation system, to adopt drip irrigation system, you don't always have to start big with it. Yes, you have 10 acres of land in your name. You have 20 acres of land in your name. You don't have to do all 20 acres when you're starting out. You can always expand. There's always room for growth. There's always room for growth. So if your capacity that it will not affect your cash flow to set up is 2 acres of land, start with 2 acres of land and make sure that you produce as like you achieve the highest possible productivity on that 2 acres. Just try and ensure you achieve the highest possible productivity on that 2 acres. So when you achieve that, you can always expand on that. You would even have more, the morale will be higher for you to expand on that without you being stranded along the way. So when you're considering irrigation, you
Wow.
can do it gradually. It doesn't have to be all out. There's always room for growth. So that will be all.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. In fact, you have actually defined to us again what productivity actually means. Like getting the optimum, like getting the optimum from that land space you've actually got. It's not about the number of acres you cultivating. It's about the measure of yield you are actually getting per land space. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you, ma. And this is a reminder before we go from Ayo Ade Abdul Salam. He said, you said you will drop something for Mr. Steven to drop it for us. Please do not forget, ma. Different crops
Yes,
and their
I will
water
definitely do that.
requirements. All right. And I also think maybe, okay, we discussed that if your slide will be available for them, so they can maybe have it and always go through it, or possibly use it as a reference. Thank you so much
Okay.
for
You're welcome.
your time, effort, and actually being with us this evening to impart us. We really appreciate. Thank you so much, ma.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, bye for now, ma.
Bye.
Our dear participants, I sure do know you enjoyed the section with Mrs. Shukra Umar on irrigation and water management, and what effects or what the importance of water management is to improving or maximizing crop productivity, and things you really need to look at, because one of the major keys to maximizing crop productivity is actually water management, because without the moisture, without water, I think the plant or your crop itself is dead, because I think about 70% of a crop composition is actually water. So it needs water to survive, it needs water to thrive. You have actually learned a whole lot. And then if you've got any other questions that has not been addressed, or you're unable to actually drop your question, you can go down to the community, the WhatsApp community, where discussions on various topics and concerns are being done. So you can actually drop it there. And the assignment that is meant to be submitted today, we actually looking at postponing, or let us say extending the deadline till Monday. So those of you that are yet to complete your assignment, please do, as later on this evening, procedure on how to get it submitted will be given to you. So thank you for joining us. I believe you are learning. Looking forward to having our next facilitator from from um, from Thailand, and also from Zambia next week. Do have a wonderful weekend. Bye.